David Tullis here. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. Don't fail to call today if you have a question about the economy and what you can do in what I'm projecting and other writers are projecting is a liquidity meltdown, similar to what we had in 2008. 2008 is just a picture, kind of Wall Street only picture of what happens when the loss of confidence spreads to more and more sectors. And remember Lehman Brothers smoking that Friday evening, smoking lower and lower before it collapsed on Monday. I was in the newsroom in the Chattanooga Times-Free Press when that whole thing unrolled, and I was handling the business section. So I had a frontline seat on all the news copy that covered that in Section C of the newspaper, which of course is still published every day. Section C handled by other people. Now, in the liquidity crisis, everyone rushes to the exits. Everyone wants to sell. Skepticism suddenly becomes endemic, and everyone suddenly knows that the system is going down, and we got to get out now. That's what happens. Though now there is still confidence, and we might want to ask Robert Kroening, the editor of the McAlvany Intelligency Advisor, what might be keeping that afloat. But the government and the owners of the debt-based money-making system have not made any fixes since 2008. There are no structural fixes, and we are, I would say, at the top of the biggest global financial bubble in world history. That is seeming to be the case. All that anybody can do is jimmy the economy. The Fed has no real levers. It has nothing it can really do. It is at the bottom of its interest rate control is at the very bottom. Interest rates are artificially suppressed almost down to zero. In Europe, we are reading in the Wall Street Journal about negative interest rates. You deposit your money, have $1 million, and you have to pay the bank for it to keep your money for you, right? That's a negative interest rate. That is a remarkable disaster. There is possible when the crisis gets going of nuclear quantitative easing. That is to say, where the government, the Fed injects billions and billions of instant money into the economy to save it and to boost confidence, as they will say, cheap credit galore anew, and Blarney, where you have your figureheads such as Warren Buffett coming out saying, well, we have a very strong economy. We are finally sound in the end. Don't worry too much. We have increasing debt, and the rate of debt creation is itself increasing. All the levels, all the indicators seem to be going up in the creation of new obligations in the private, corporate, and government sector. What I'm saying is not new to people who read the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, published by Don McAlvany. Robert Kroening has been the editor. He's 61 years old now, has been the editor since age 51. And he is a local resident of this international financial newsletter that has had more or less the same appearance for the past 40 years. I remember getting it as a younger editor and journalist. I read the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, and it has the same look as when I used to get it in the mail every month. There is a bleak prognosis. Don is writing about confidence and the economy being high right now. Robert Kroening, why? What is McAlvany's explanation of why the economy is still where it is, and the stock market seems to be the S&P and the Dow, they all seem to be at or near their highs? What's keeping it up, and what's the danger to these expressions of economic life and activity?
Well, the United States has had a very long history, at least long in our minds. It's not long compared to Europe, of course, or China, but it has had a long history of being functional. It has had a long history of being the most functional nation in the world. We have a lot of honest people here. We have a lot of hardworking people here. We have a lot of businesses that provide good products. We have a lot of trust in the people that we do business with. All of that has been going on for quite a while, and people are used to it. And so they have a great deal of optimism about the future in terms of the people that they deal with. They might not have a lot of optimism about the government or the situation, but the people that they know, they're used to trusting and doing business with and being friends with and relying upon their word. the big thing that changes when that confidence is lost, as David mentioned earlier, it can happen slowly at first. It can be very much like a dam that springs a leak that gets worse and worse, and then the dam goes. That kind of thing can happen. It depends on what the situation is. Any number of things can cause a loss of confidence. But when they do, then people stop trusting other people with their goods, even people they've trusted for a long time. That's what happens when there's a run on the bank. People have trusted their bank through a lot of fairly hard times in the past, but when it comes down to a crisis, they want that cash in their hands. And that's when they find out that fractional reserve banking means that the banks have a lot more money loaned out than they have on hand. And they have a lot more in terms of your savings account than they can give you in money. And the first people might get their money, but those that come a little bit later are out of luck. And that kind of a confidence then tends to become cumulative. It tends to grow. It becomes logarithmic after a while. People really begin to panic. When trust between people breaks down, then it becomes every man for himself. It becomes chaos. And that's when things get very nasty because you just don't know what anybody else is going to do. If you haven't prepared for that kind of a situation, your only solution is to take from those who have. If you have prepared for it, then your only solution is to protect what you've got against those who are trying to take it. It's a situation that has happened many times in history, many times in history. It's not a new thing. It's just going to be new, at least to the extent that a lot of people see coming in the United States. Now, of course, we've had a great deal of rioting. We had a lot of rioting during the 1861 war period, a lot of even in the North, a lot of protesting against policies that were going on. We had, of course, the riots back in the 60s, 1960s I'm talking about. So we've had some very rough times, but we've never had anything that completely tore the fabric of the United States culture and our society.
Well, McAlvany has he has a cultural, geopolitical analysis, monetary analysis, and on all of those fronts, it seems to be very bleak. That American culture, American society is riven and sclerotic. That there's an increasing gap, as even people on the left are saying, between the haves, the top 1% or the top 0.1%, and the middle. You might say people who are have-nots, or they're just one check away from having to file Chapter 11.
Well, Don likes to quote Solzhenitsyn, who, when he was asked why the bad things happened to Russia that did, said, the people there forgot God. And Don believes the same thing has happened here. And it's not a thing where we have lost our lucky rabbit's foot. That's not what he's saying. He's not putting the word of God and the faith in God as some kind of spiritual or superstitious belief. He's talking about the fact that the Christian religion has always come with a set of standards that it sets forth and says is true about life. It's not unique to Christianity. Every belief system has that. The big question is whether they're functional or not, whether they cause a society to work. We can look at Europe and see the Protestant Reformation and the countries that it was deeply affected by within 100 or 200 years became the first world. Clearly, it's a very functional belief system. It causes people to suspect themselves when something goes wrong and take care of other people when something needs to be done. So that kind of thing makes a huge difference in the individual's life. It makes a big difference in families, but those are the bricks of society. And when those things are strong, then society begins to reflect the same kinds of things. Churches get stronger, and then civil governments get stronger as well. It's just like enriching the soil. Everything that grows out of it becomes stronger. And what he is seeing is that enrichment of the soil has stopped. We have begun to put faith in man, in people. When we say that, things have an evolutionary beginning, and when we say that man is the measure of all things, and there is no God, and we have to save ourselves, then it brings out the question as to what standard we're going to go by. If every man has his own standard, which one are we going to go by? Well, it's the strongest one. And that's why you begin to see things like you did in Russia, where the state begins to enforce its will on everybody else, and the individual completely goes away in his importance because the state is the entity that matters.
Right. When there is no God, the state is the leading carnivore, the biggest strip mining operation, and the thing being stripped and mined are the people, their children, private estates, private value, is what you're saying, Robert Kroening. Well, you mentioned where the faith of the people is, and you say that in McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, the observations that people have faith in man and faith in man's systems. What are these systems that men have faith in? Let's talk about my listener here, Robert. Where is his faith now, would you want to suppose, and how is that faith mistaken? We have faith in Congress. Okay, is that wrong? I mean, we're facing elections, we're facing primaries. Is it wrong to have faith in Congress that it will do the right thing? And what other areas is this faith misplaced? And how can he better account for what McAlvany Intelligence Advisor says is a reckoning? Where's his faith misplaced, and what's going to happen with that faith if these things happen?
Well, I think all of those things that you mentioned are involved. When you stop putting your faith in a sovereign God who has the right to tell everybody what's right and what's wrong, and does so again in ways that are functional, that are very helpful for individuals all the way up through all institutions. You then start to, in America, we've had functional institutions for a long time, and so we tend to think that they have authority and functionality of themselves. They have something, I call it the third base fallacy. You may have heard the joke that somebody was born on third base and they think they heard it, that they hit a triple. And a lot of people are like that with regard to the way America is today. America stands on the shoulders of 2,000 years of Christian development in the West. And a great amount of character and traits have been built up through that time. A lot of people have those who no longer have the faith that engendered them. And so they think that those are inherent in humankind and that every person has them and that we can just rely on people as a result. And in fact, if you go to other countries, you'll be disabused of that notion fairly quickly, and some countries faster than others. But the fact of the matter is that as we begin to trust human institutions, and it doesn't matter what institution is, it can be the government, it can be the Fed, it can be,
the Social Security Administration.
Social Security Administration. How many people are relying on Social Security for their retirement? 59% is the latest figure that I have seen. People that have no appreciable savings for retirement and therefore will be relying entirely upon an organization that had about $58 billion in shortfall in 2017. Well, if that's the case, they're not far from bankruptcy, and people that are relying on that for their final years, and that may be all they're relying on. They may not even have children. Children have been de-emphasized in the West, and even those that have them killed by abortion, and those that are here are not always given the understanding that they have a responsibility for their parents. And so we are entirely relying upon the government, or perhaps even our pensions, and a number of pension plans are in severe trouble. A lot of municipal pension plans are in such deep trouble that there's really no effective way they can get out of it. And and all pension plans, I don't care which one they are in America, are dependent upon the dollar, and we've already discussed the problems with that. So when you have hope in humankind to solve all these problems, you soon find out that that's not a good place to put your hope.
Well, in what way does Don McAlvany, Robert Kroening, argue that local society, local connections, neighborhood relations are a way of dealing with the coming financial disaster? Does he talk about what I would call local economy, localism, sort of a personalistic ethic in one's commerce and one's business? Does he deal with that, or does he just leave that to other writers to explore, and he's just talking about the great dangers?
I think he looks more at the big picture than he does at that. He's very sympathetic to it. He has lived that way in the communities where I have observed him to live. And so he very much emphasizes doing business with local people and building up relationships there. He has people who have worked for him for 30 years and 35 years, and a great number that have worked over 20. I've been there 10. So clearly relationships are critical as far as he's concerned. And the lower down in the hierarchy, the better, because again, that's where you have friends and people that you can rely on because you know them and you have a commitment to one another that goes beyond simply coming from the same country.
If there is a financial disaster, would McAlvany advise my listener to look out for himself or look out for others?
He would always advise you to look out for others. That is, as I said, part of the Christian ethic. It is necessary to look after yourself, and especially if you're a family person, you're going to have to look after your family. That is looking after others. So there's a good bit of both involved. But the very definite missing link in all of this is that concern for other people that is so preeminent in Christian teaching. Love your enemy as yourself. Do good to others. Don't bear false witness. Don't steal. Any number of commands. I could go on that build up a very, very strong fabric, a social fabric. It builds up a very strong character in the person that it is transforming, but it also makes relationships far stronger.
800-8949, 800-8949 is the number to call. This is David Tillis. We're talking with Robert Kroening, who is the editor of McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, put out by Don McAlvany for 40 years now and more. And if you have a question for him about, let's say, gold or silver or the geopolitical future, please call 800-8949, brought to you by Nuganomics.com. That's Nuganomics.com, the website here in Chattanooga, the blog for the man who matters. And my name is David Tillis, blogger with the biggest pen. One thing that I might say worries me a little bit about Don McAlvany, Robert Kroening, is that he seems to be concerned about the ending of the nation state. He talks about, you might say, the official conspiracy, the Trilateral Commission, and others, Bilderbergers and other groups, some working in the open, some working in secret, which are sort of transnational or post-national in their goals. What does give me a sense of his thinking on the nation state? Is it coming to an end and we should be glad? Or is it coming to an end and America as we know it shall disappear and we should mourn and fight that prospect?
Well, I think he probably leans a little bit more toward the latter than the former. It's not so much that he is wedded to the nation state as an international ideal as that he has seen America as a very good place to live. He's not a spring chicken anymore, and he knows that life has been good here. I think most Americans would agree. And he mourns the passing of so much civility that we've enjoyed, so much prosperity that we've enjoyed, so much friendship, so much family, so many good things that we have just enjoyed in abundance. And so I think he sees that as a very sad thing to see passing away. And again, as I said, it is already passing away. I should mention before I get too far along that you can read some of this yourself if you would like to get a free issue of the newsletter. You can call the number that I'm about to read off to you, and they'll send you an electronic copy of the newsletter free. The number is toll free. It's 877-622-5826. That's 877-622-5826. You can also read more at miatoday.com. And there's a few websites associated with the other McAlvany companies as well. If you just Google McAlvany, you'll see what some of those other ones are. There's the brokerage company, and there's a wealth management company.
So generally, we're mentioning wealth management and so on. If my listener is an investor, he probably should have some interest in gold and silver. Is that right, Robert Kroening?
Very much so.
As part of your portfolio.
Right. You don't want to be all in that, and the McAlvanys don't recommend that, but they do recommend that a portion of your assets be in gold and silver for the simple reason that when everything else gets washed away, they're still there.
And that's because gold and silver are no one else's liability or obligation.
Precisely so. When we talk about the breakdown of trust and the breakdown of relationships, it doesn't matter what your relationship with anyone is. Your gold is still worth something.
Right.
So
but remember, I would point out that when you have gold and silver saved up, that's not an investment, that's a savings, because the money, your wealth at that point is stagnant. It's not doing any work in the economy. It's just waiting for the crisis, waiting to get over to the other side of where then you can liquidate that back into maybe new currency. Robert Kroening, thank you very much for joining us here on the David Cruz Show.
Thank you, David.
And the number again that he mentioned for a free copy, a digital copy of the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, 877-622-5826, 877-622-5826. And again, that's the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor. And we've been hearing from the editor, Robert Kroening. The number here, 800-8949.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
He's been arrested 55 times in 19 years. Now Gary Little is charged with aggressive panhandling, trespassing, and public intoxication. The manager for City Cafe told the Chattanoogan that he had an altercation with Little in the parking lot when he told him to get lost. The TBI nabbed 3 suspects in connection with the death of Tommy